welcome along to the show. Tim, how are we going today?
Good.
That
So
is
you're going to
good.
tell them the backstory here, the entire history of Jason Hunt and Tim Minchin.
Yeah, let's do it.
I
So,
think it's riveting history, a long and
longest.
storied friendship that
So,
started 5 weeks ago. But a
yeah,
lot's happened.
to be fair, a lot has happened in
We've
that time.
recorded an entire podcast that we think we're going to throw in the trash.
Yeah, so this is take two. So this started the Thursday before City to
City to
Surf
Surf. I came to
this
pick
year
up
in
my
Sydney.
my number or something.
Yeah, and I was working with a brand at the expo, and Tim walked past, and as you know, I'm sure many others do, I yelled out, "Tim!"
Do my podcast, bro.
Pretty much that was it. In fact,
Yeah.
I think what was even better was I think I said, "You're probably not quite right for it, but
Yeah, totally, which proved to be the case. So then I said yes, and you said it's called Execs Who Run, and I'm like, well, I don't know if I'm an exec. I'm very happy to come and have a chat. And then I ran the City to Surf and felt pretty good and started getting into my head that I should run a marathon. And then we recorded the podcast, but I hadn't decided yet. And wasn't it like 7 in the morning or something?
I don't think it was 7 in the morning, but
Felt
it
like
was
it.
it was a little bit later. But you were definitely hungover, so it might have
Oh, was
felt
I
like
hungover?
7.
Is that what it was?
Yeah.
And then in recompense for me doing your podcast, I said you have to run coach me to the Melbourne Marathon. And so we've been doing a bit of that and waiting to see if my body breaks before I hit the start line.
Yeah. So
And
we might
now
we,
now
we
here
might
we
hold
are.
there.
Yeah, because we don't know yet whether I'm going to make it. What are we? We're 2 weeks out now.
Yeah, and we'll explore
The journey.
the journey, the burgeoning coaching relationship that is Tim and
Yeah,
Jason.
yeah, that's right.
But what we might do is we might go all the way back to Tim's Perth life, and obviously it's because it's pretty seminal into you becoming a human, but also seminal to you and your running. So, do you just want to take us through the kind of the early years of
Birth.
Tim Minchin, of your birth? Yeah, we'll
my
start
birth,
there.
yeah. I have strong memories of my birth. Yeah, well, I grew up in a hockey family. My dad was a hockey player, and all my siblings. I'm one of four, and but I wasn't. I was kind of a asthmatic, quite round, slightly one of these kids that sort of in and out of hospital. Not in a terrible way, just like a bit allergic and asthma attacks. And I had a weird thing when I was young where I lost. I had it was like some sort of paralysis for a couple of days, which is probably off the back of a allergic reaction on my granddad's farm or something over Easter in about 1980 or 82. I couldn't walk I remember being carried to the loo, and so weird stuff. But because we're from a hockey family, I was playing from 5 or 6, and played all the way through till my late 20s. And somewhere I was always okay at it. And somewhere in my, going through puberty and stuff, I just kind of grew out of everything and became quite sporty, really. And my strength as a hockey player was always having a big tank.
Yeah, right.
Mm.
Did you realize that like running was going to be a thing for you at that point because of this kind of endurance that you seemingly had?
Maybe it's a bit chicken and eggy because I don't know if I identified that I could keep running until I was sort of in senior grades and it became more valuable to do so. I was quite flary as well. I had bad vision but good stick skills, so head down. But in parallel to that, as I grew out of my asthma and kind of got a bit longer, my dad noticed I could sort of run his races. He was a middle distance. He ran 1500, just high school,
Yeah.
And so I think my first kind of go for a run, my first sort of 5K with dad, I guess I was in my early teens. And then I ran second division high school 8s and 15s and came 6th, but the idea that I and in my 15s, it was always having a bit of kick, right? It was like I couldn't really keep up, but I would tend to pass 3 or 4 people in the last 200 meters. So yeah, somewhere in there, I sort of started thinking of myself as a runner. And then when I went to uni, I did all the things that uni students do, like put on a bunch of weight and stop taking care of myself and eating too many burgers and drinking too many beers. And yet in parallel to that, I was playing reasonable senior hockey. So I was in this period where I was probably a bit bigger and carrying a bit too much weight, but still, yeah, I don't know when I peaked. Like somewhere in there, I ran a 37-minute 10K or something at 18, 19 something. And that was probably as fast as I got. Just because I was young and stubborn and wanted to beat my friends, you know.
Fair.
And yeah.
You kind of realized that you probably weren't going to become a professional runner as your career.
No, well, it wasn't until much later that I went. I've always thought of myself as a not particularly athletic person who just is stubborn and really likes it. And it's only later I went, oh no, I'm biomechanically fine, but I'm certainly not biomechanically an elite athlete.
Yeah. So what was Tim's plan as a 16, 17-year-old finishing high school and heading to university? What was he going to be doing with the rest of his life?
Well, I think I'm very lucky because my parents, though far from sort of hippie parents, they were reasonably demanding is not quite the word. We were all brought up in a sort of very middle, my dad's a surgeon and his dad's a surgeon and my mum comes from, a reasonably established Perth business family. And so there's just this real sense of you don't muck around, you don't break the rules, you get A's and B's and you go to uni and you look people in the eye and shake their hand, that sort of good upbringing. And so all that was in place, but they were different from many of my peers' parents in that I never got the feeling that I was expected to do medicine or law or commerce, which was the kind of message that I went to an all-boys school, and that seemed to be the pervasive message. So I was really lucky in that way. And a side effect of that is I don't think I felt like I needed to have a vocational degree or aim. And quite early, I went and did an arts degree. I mean, everyone, my mum and my grandma and all my uncles and my brothers and sisters, we've all done arts degrees, right? A huge advocate, by the way. I think it's a fantastic.
And confirm also an arts degree graduate.
Yeah, general degrees, I think. Learning to think and express yourself, all that stuff. To think a bit more expansively. But I think I thought I'd probably be a teacher, or I vaguely liked design and architecture, but I'm not a mathematician, so I never really took that seriously. After first year, my marks were good and I got offered law, even though I didn't get into law out of school, and I was tempted by that because it made me feel smart, but I was tempted for about 5 seconds. I guess I thought I would teach, but at about 18, I was in bands with my brother all through the end of high school and into uni. And when I was about 18, I wrote my first theatre score for youth theatre, and everyone's eyes kind of widened when they heard it. And somewhere in there, the thought entered my head that maybe somewhere I could maybe make a living as a musician. But because I was untrained and brought up in this reasonably conservative environment, I thought you needed to go and study and learn to read music and stuff to become a musician. It took me a few years to realize I didn't need to do that. I just needed to get good.
So you finish your university degree.
Mm-hmm. My first one, I did a Bachelor of Arts. Yeah.
Finished
rocked
that
through
off.
that.
And
Wasted it a bit.
Yeah. So what were you gonna do? Finish that? Right. Here I am with an arts degree.
So through that arts degree, I wrote 5 or 6 scores. I did lots of hanging out with my girlfriend, and I always found it reasonably easy to get reasonable marks. So it's like everyone says, uni is the academic side of uni is slightly wasted on you when you're young, especially when you're lucky like me. While I was at uni doing my arts degree, I was pretty busy. So I was playing sport, working hardwares and cafes and doing my degree, but also writing music for youth theatre and stuff. And when I got to the end of my degree, and Sarah and I broke up. I'm with the same person I was with from first year uni, but we broke up for a couple of years. And my folks were like, well, what are you going to do now? You've got your arts degree, you know, honours, or I was going to do honours in literature. And I said, may I have it? I was still living at home, right? Very Perth. I said, can I just have a year to just do theatre and music and just see how I go? Like I had this idea that I'd give it a bash for a year, as if that is how it works. But I did heaps of plays in 1996 and just rolling theatre shows and lots of gigs. And during that year, I decided I wanted to go study music. So I spent the second half of that year prepping for an audition, trying to get good enough to get into the conservatorium to do a commercial music course.
So as a musician, what was your kind of first love then? Because you play a lot of different things and you sing obviously and all this kind of stuff, but what was
I mean, I'm a pianist. I mean, I guess piano was the thing that, you know, I'd sit down and play at parties and it'd make girls like me. That is a big motivation for all musicians. But what's interesting about how I learnt is I did up to grade 3 piano. I didn't really take to it. Certainly my piano teacher, Jean Craig, who I saw over the years, I don't know if she's still with us, but she was in her early 90s last time she came to one of my concerts. And she always said, "Oh, Tim, I didn't spot it. I'm sorry. I didn't see the talent." And I'm like, "I don't think it was there, Dal. I just, you know, like I was just a shitty little, I don't think I displayed any particular propensity. I certainly, no one at school sort of, in anything I'm good at, actually. I did the school plays, but I wasn't the lead role. And, you know, I was a bit of a late bloomer. But the interesting thing about how I eventually became okay at the piano is I really learnt by writing songs. So once I figured out what the sort of chords were, I just wrote a song using the chords I knew. And then when I worked out what a slightly more advanced harmonic, you know, set of chords were, I wrote a song using them. And I just every time I learned something new, I'd write a song. So my instinct was always to write, I think.
Okay, so let's fast forward to Melbourne. So you clearly did, like, you weren't going to give it a bash for a year because that's never going to happen as a musician. So we're probably a few years into you giving it a bash as a musician.
Yeah, well, I got married and moved to Melbourne in 2002. So that I'd been giving it a bash for 6 years by then. And by then, all my income and my life was music. It was just very unromantic wedding bands and piano bars and disco bands and original bands and Shakespeare in the Park and little plays and improv. And I was just living that life.
You'd given everything a crack. Had you kind of landed on, or were you trying to work towards a particular outcome, a particular goal? Like, what was the thing you really wanted to be doing at that time?
By the time I moved to Melbourne, one of the things I've always loved, which is acting, not that I was particularly dedicated to it and I never trained or auditioned to train, but I realized I was okay. And if you want to be an actor, it's hard. Staying in Perth is hard. So that motivated me. And I'd also made an album in my house with my brother, a sort of glorified demo, very glorified though, like sort of epic 15-track work with strings and horns and stuff, but not amazing production quality. And I had sent that out to all the record companies and globally, actually, to weird little record companies in San Francisco and England, and surprisingly had got quite amazing feedback, but all rejections. And so I went to Melbourne with an album, wanting to get a record deal or at least reinvigorate my my original project. And on the other hand, I thought I could act. And as a musician actor, I imagined there were roles for people like me in theatre companies in Melbourne, people who can play and act. I thought I'll take those skills to Melbourne as well. And I proceeded to not find any record company interest and not be able to get a single agent in the country to represent me as an actor.
I want to segue back into what was happening with your running. during this
Yes.
period?
Yeah. So, I mean, I kind of never stopped running. The sort of my fitness and seriousness ebbed and flowed. And certainly there've been periods where I imagine there might have been 1 or 2 periods where I stopped for some months. Maybe just weeks. But my running tended to correlate or inversely correlate to how well I was doing, as in, if I was really busy and occupied, I would run less. And if I felt bad about how things were going, I would run more. I would use running as a goal. I've always been someone who needs a goal. And if I was struggling to find a clear goal in my career, which as an artist is half your life, is trying to go, well, no one else is asking me to work. How do I get up in the morning and know how to proceed, right? How do I want to be a hardworking person, but I don't even know where to point my energy, you know? And when you're that sort of personality, you want to be diligent, you want to pursue a goal, but you just don't know what the next step is. A good place to put that is into something else where you can set yourself a target and feel good about reaching it. Because you can imagine being a muso, like, I'm sure a lot of your listeners just think, you know, it's a sort of fun and it's a game for people who don't take life too seriously or whatever. And there's plenty of them, but I never took the dole. It never would have crossed my mind that I'm allowed to because of how I was brought up. I never got a grant. I just tried to make a living out of my music. And you have to imagine what it's like to go week to week without even having someone hand you a paycheck. A paycheck is like, thank you for doing a thing that we value. Here's recompense for a valuable thing you've done. Even if it's a crappy job, it is affirmation for a job well done. And absent that from your life, and it can be really hard on your mental health and stuff. And it's not a sob story because who the hell gets to be an artist? But I put some of that need for goal achievement into my running. And so when I was in Melbourne, even though it's the period of my life where I earned the least money and felt the most lost, that first year or two in Melbourne, I got running pretty quick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did it feel like because, you know, as both of making yourself feel better about yourself as providing that challenge and accomplishing that challenge.
Yes. Yeah.
It's also a coping mechanism, right? But did
Yeah.
it feel like a healthy coping mechanism for you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I could definitely frame it as sort of self-flagellation for being a failure. And certainly a thing I love about, I do a lot of HIIT class. Now I'm older, until I decided I wanted to run a bit more this year, I've mostly been doing HIIT classes and combining my love of aerobic exercise with the stuff you're meant to do as you get older, resistance and stuff. But I just love pushing myself till I want to vomit. It just feels good. So I could frame it as a sort of toxic coping mechanism, sort of. But I don't know. Why not just have there's so little bad about having an instinct to kind of thrash yourself against your own limitations. The toxicity comes when you're like, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you like this as well? Why don't you, come on, mate, come on, lift up that rock. It's, you know, when it becomes alpha male competitive nonsense. But if it's just pointed at yourself and your own desire to prove yourself to yourself, I don't know, whatever the origin is, we can Freud the hell out of that, second child syndrome, whatever. But it's very functional. And translates outside of exercise, obviously. And I'm sure there's a lot of your listeners who have this sort of personality. The instinct to demand of yourself something almost out of your reach and do it anyway, but, you know, in a work metaphor parlance, you know, bite off more than you can chew and chew like hell. And combined with that, a sense that, and this is the bit that maybe as you get older you need to work on, a sense that whatever you do, it's not quite enough. These are, as I say, things that Dr. Freud could have a field day with, but they're incredibly functional as long as you keep an eye on, as I say, pushing that out into your expectations of others and especially your children. I'm very keen that my children don't inherit quite my level of that's not good enoughness,
Yeah. And I think it's a relatable point, as you say, like it is things that many people that listen to this and the kind of demographic that it's targeting would relate to, because
it's functional. It's why they're where they're at.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, yes, it's a coping mechanism, and yes, every coping mechanism can have a dangerous level to it or a dangerous end to it.
Yeah.
But ultimately it's like, yeah, I'm stressed. I go for a run. That makes me less stressed.
Yeah.
Feels pretty bloody good idea to me, right?
Yeah, that's right. And like everything is dose related, Jason. and also time related. So you're a lot younger than me, but I'm I turn 50 in a couple of weeks. And especially in my industry where, I've had some pretty public hits, like writing Matilda is a thing that many, many, many people would like to get to, and nearly no one does. No one. That's a black swan. It's an outlier, not a black swan, but an outlier. And it combined with these personality traits that we're discussing could become a new impossible bar that you chase again. Why wasn't my next musical as big a hit? What about I better write another hit? Interestingly, I don't have any of that. I'm incredibly at peace, and that's probably because my worldview is very determinist. So I think it's all just luck, and I'm very happy that I got that hit and I don't need to chase it again. And the other side to that coin, I guess, is that I want to be an industry leader and an older person, a senior member of my my community genre industry, who is not going quietly into the dark. No, not giving up on ambition or anything, but being generous in with one's power. Making sure that the second half of my career has a bigger role for trying to help other people achieve their goals, as well as continuing down my merry path of trying to kick the dick of everything, yeah. So, and that's something I have to work on to cool the competitive thing, the self, and go, no, there's more honorable uses for your status now.
Well, can we go back to, I guess, that the beginning of that, what started all this and that breakout point for you, the overnight success, 10 years in the making.
Yeah.
And with the context of, and I bring this up because I think a lot of people who know you, certainly how I came to know you, and it was probably 5 years after this because of YouTube and whatnot, but know you as a musical comedian, right? Like you're a funny guy. That's what you're probably, for some people, probably more known than for Matilda, right?
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
So when did that aspect come into things, and how did it end up being successful for you?
Well, it was always there from very early on. When I was 15, I wrote weird, quirky songs. I just loved words. I come from a bit of I grew up with this pianola in my house, a pedal piano. You probably don't know what one is, but my great-grandmother's pedal piano with all these rolls. It's a mechanism impossible to explain to a digital generation. But so I had this old music, this sort of patter music, slightly, lots of Gilbert Sullivan and stuff. And so I had that in my background and a bit of theatre, and obviously massive Beatles fans and all that. Loved harmonies, loved words, but also I'm a theatre nerd. So the way words work, Wordsworth's words work. My brain, as it just did then, will go to any opportunity to find beauty and play with words. And so I was just inclined in this direction. Added to that, I was someone who has been brought up to not think taking oneself too seriously is that wasn't seen as, but we weren't a hilarious family, but it was frowned upon to sort of have tickets on yourself or take yourself too seriously. And as a middle class guy who loved hockey and running and, was with my first girlfriend, the kind of growing up in the grunge era and watching my peers like play act, like having big problems, I was like, inclined to go, oh, mate, get your hand off it. And I would do that to myself, even though I had big feelings and I wrote breakup songs, and I would tend to just want to laugh at myself because I'm like, mate, you don't have problems. Stop pretending you grew up in the hood, you know? So when I made
song
that, well, exactly. Well, that's what Rock and Roll Nerd is, and Dark Side, actually, two of the songs that I broke out with. And that album I described making with my brother at the turn of the century had like half quite silly songs. You know, one started, I've never had sex inside a church, but I love the thought of nuns in G strings. And I had songs called Who's the Fella This Week, Bitch, back when the word bitch was a little bit more casual, and quirky songs. But I also had completely sincere songs, some of which I put on my album that just came out this year. One called Moment of Bliss that I wrote when I was 20. I can't quite believe I wrote when I was 20. It's a very gentle, sort of thoughtful song. Anyway, it's part of the reason I struggled to get any record company interest. They all go, we don't know what you are. Are you a novelty act? And I started going, okay, if half my songs people interpret as novelty songs, like frickin' Weird Al or something, then maybe I need to try to separate these two seemingly distinct things. They didn't feel distinct to me. For me, it was on a curve, but for listeners, it seemed to be like they wanted to A-B it. They wanted to false binary it. And so I went, fine, I will put all my serious stuff aside and I'll do a cabaret show. In Melbourne, cabaret was a thing. I was playing for Eddie Perfect. I was playing cabaret piano for other acts. I'm going to write my own show and I'm just going to put my weird stuff and my quirky stuff. And I did that in late 2003. And I thought, this is like a curious cabaret show. But rather than responding like it was a cabaret show, the audience just laughed and laughed and laughed. And as I always have since I was quite young, I found when I got on stage, my brain just goes into a overdrive and I know how to make people laugh. And so the following year, I started calling it comedy instead of cabaret. And within 18 months, I was Royal Albert Hall, you know. So it's like I just figured out what my specialty was, that for the thing I could do that was A, least common, you know, not everyone can do it, and B, had a market. And at the Edinburgh Fringe, it became very clear that there was a market for what I was doing. The difference between me and most people, and this is jumping forward, but is that I decided I didn't want that to be all. So some years later, I sort of pulled back on all that. But I certainly had a absolutely cracking comedy career. I mean, it was, in hindsight, that 5 or 6 years that went from tiny cabaret venues to 10,000 seaters with an orchestra was a vertiginous roller coaster. At the time, it just felt like graft, but fun graft.
So works out well. You pick up your life. You move over to London.
London with a 6-month pregnant wife. Yep.
She loved that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, she did in the end. But she was up for it. I mean, we'd been together for a long time, and the fact that it looked like maybe I could make a living, we were like, let's go, let's do it.
I imagine she was excited. Like, God, I've dealt with this guy for 10 years.
Oh yeah,
finally.
Well, I mean, she was a social worker, and I would scrape together a bearable income, and she would have her bearable just social work income, and together we were pretty poor. But she did not love social work. So part of the thing was like, come to England, have a baby. I reckon, you know, there's this big wig manager over there who's promising me we'll be fine. So let's do it.
Yeah, amazing. What happened to your running during this time? Because I guess what we just discovered in Melbourne was when things were going well, there wasn't as much running.
Yeah, right.
And now things are going
I think
really
at MAPS,
well.
I think at MAPS, we having a baby and a embryonic career, or at least a baby career, both the baby and the baby career needed a lot of feeding and attention. And Sarah was and remained the primary carer in a very old school sense. So she really facilitated the attention I needed to put on my career. But if you look back at the YouTube vids of that period, you can tell I'm not running quite as much. But yes, I mean, I just got very, very busy. And probably, I think, you know, we tell these stories in hindsight, but I think it's probably true that without the desire to sort of punish myself for not doing so well, I didn't feel the drive as much. So it did drop away, I think.
Do you regret not doing a bit of running at that time? Like, do you think it would have been a beneficial thing for you to have done, or was it just not even coming across your mind?
I mean, I definitely kept exercising. I'm the way I'm built. If I stop exercising, I get really big really quickly. Is it the way I'm built? I don't know. Who cares? And I'm not. It's luck. Yeah, I'm not shaming bigger people. And I honestly don't feel for other people any contempt or judgment at all. Like when I see bigger people, I don't go that they look terrible. But when I get bigger, I don't feel good. Especially when you're on camera, and I'm a person with a pretty big face. So if you add any weight, all that bullshit, narcissism. So I always exercised. I just wasn't at my best. I don't know when we sort of discovered gym classes, but eventually halfway through our time in England, when our babies were born, Sarah and I found a thing around the corner where we'd go and do these half-hour sort of HIIT sessions with a shared trainer. And that was the beginning of that sort of era. That's much less exciting to talk about.
Well, there was a little bit of a running story in that period, and is one of probably the only times that you've actually worn a bib, like actually done a race.
Oh yeah, I've done a couple of races. I did a couple of races in England, one half marathon and one primary school fundraiser 5K.
Yeah. And it was because of a bet with fellow comedian Mark Watson that you did.
Yeah, that's right.
Did that marathon in London.
The half,
Do you remember anything about that?
Well, there's a couple of things. I think I framed it as a bet because Mark and I are good friends, and it's always fun when you've got a public profile to sort of fake a rivalry. It's that, who is it? Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds.
Oh, yeah.
But two things happen. One, in those years, as soon as you start doing well in my industry, you are asked to represent and do charity work. And I was an ambassador for something called the Prince's Foundation for Children and the Arts, which I was quite passionate about. And so two things happened. One, they said, I don't suppose you want to do a marathon a half marathon for us. And I'm like, they didn't even know I was a runner. And I said yes. And the other was that Mark had done one and had got a time that I thought was pretty good. And I thought, well, I better try and beat that.
Did you?
Yes, I think by significantly.
Yeah.
And what was his time? I think he ran 100 minutes or something, and I ran 91.
Something like that,
yeah.
So clearly you were still in pretty good shape, being able to just off not too much running, go and run a 91-minute half, right?
Yeah, I certainly didn't train or anything, but I think at that stage I was running a bit. I think I was back into it a bit. Yeah.
Nice.
The primary school 5K was like this weird run from the primary school through Highgate Woods, up this muddy hill and back down again. And I ran that in whatever. It wasn't very fast, but given the conditions, it was under 18 minutes or something. And there was a guy, like the guy who organized this was like this really handsome, I think Italian guy who lived in North London, and he every year organized it and thrashed everybody because he was a marathon guy, a big runner, like really gangly and stuff. So in my history of running, I got past him. I always had it, as I said, I got a bit of kick. So I kept in touch with him. And then in the last 500 meters, overtook him. So in my history, that was glorious, beating that strutting Italian. I don't even know if any of that's true. That's how I remember it.
Well, all I'm hearing is that basically you're 2 from 2.
Yeah,
at this point,
right. Exactly,
in running events,
that's right. Yeah. Winning is all about setting the conditions in such a way that it's possible or inevitable. Yeah,
an imperious running career to date.
Yeah, exactly.
And it corresponds at the pivotal point, really, in your career with Matilda.
Yeah, that's right. It's about then.
Pretty incredible story. Do you want to take us through that journey?
Oh, I mean, yeah, it's
the condensed version. Yeah,
it's the most told story in my life. But I love remembering it. I mean, again, that 5-6 years where things were just ratcheting up and up. At the time, it all felt reasonable. It didn't feel crazy because it was just sort of exponential. The venues just kept doubling in size, and I had an appetite for the work. But in the middle of 2008, I had a meeting with the director Matthew Watchus, who I didn't know at the time, has become a very, very dear friend. And he said, do you know Roald Dahl? And I'm like, yeah, I know all of Roald Dahl. And he said, have you heard of Matilda? And I'm like, yeah, actually, there's this huge coincidence in this story, because in a little after I recorded that album, Turn of the Century, I had written to the Dahl estate about Matilda because I was writing music for a children's theatre company. I thought it would be a good idea to just do, I was writing songs that would be sung 4 times and then never heard of again. Like I was doing $1,000 jobs. And I was like, can I get the rights to Matilda? I want to do a kids musical. And they're like, you could send a sample score and we could consider it. And I'm like, oh no, I don't, what? And I just forgot about it. And then here we are, whatever it was, 7-8 years later. And he just thought I was lying or something. And he said, have you ever written musical theatre? And I just went home and sent him like 8 CDs of my stuff, which of course was all tiny stuff, tiny little Perth stuff, and a musical I wrote about Penrith and on commission, And actually the opening of Matilda, which has been being played 8 shows a week on the West End for 14 years, is largely stolen from the opening of Somewhere, the magical musical of Penrith, written 2-3 years earlier. And then opened in 2010 in Stratford upon Avon, the night after I opened my orchestra tour, arena tour in Birmingham Arena. That night, the reviews came out at midnight, and there was a meeting the next morning. I only had 1 day off. I had to be at some other arena the next day, but we all met for breakfast and we're like, right, West End. Who's the producer that's going to transfer it? What do we do? Blah, blah. What changes do we need to make? And it took a while to get to the West End in the end, but then it's sat there ever since.
It's an awesome story. And yeah, it's a great show. In fact, it's the only show that I've seen. I saw it on Broadway 10 years ago now. The only show I think I've seen on Broadway, but it was a good time.
It's pretty iconic. Yeah.
Good job. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's back on tour in the UK now, and this whatever it is, autumn, and yeah, hopefully back in Australia on tour in a year or something. But I mean, it won't last forever on the West End. It's already the most successful British musical this century, and I have to prepare myself for what life will be like when that closes down. But it's just been the most amazing thing for lots and lots of reasons, artistically and sort of culturally, and knowing that there are millions of children in the world who will, for the rest of their lives, remember that their first visit to the theatre was that show, and the lessons about autonomy and taking control of your own story, and books and reading, and the power of stories, and the lesson that it gives to little girls about standing up for yourself, and all these things that I feel very proud of, but also the artistic freedom it gave me. It bought me the right to move away from comedy when I felt like I wanted to do more, because it gave me financial security.
I apologize to the people who are not musical theatre nerds. You can skip through any of the stuff if you want. But obviously,
you have to be. You will be musical theatre nerds at the end of this scintillating chat.
You'll be experts. Obviously, as a bit of an actor yourself, and you've played probably the greatest musical theatre role that there is in Judas and Jesus Christ Superstar.
Certainly for me, yeah.
Yeah. You feel like a good Judas type character.
Yeah, I love to betray. Yeah.
Do you see yourself, or did you ever envisage yourself being in Matilda?
Well, it crossed my mind that if in the next few years it looks like it's heading for its end, that I should go and do 6 months as Miss Trunchbull. But I'm not sure I'll be able to. But unlike Groundhog Day, which I wrote with a kind of actor like me in mind, an actor who could really do sincerity, really do comedy, and have a quite high range. I never wrote myself into Matilda. My favourite roles in Matilda are Matilda herself and Miss Honey, and I don't think I'd do either of them very well.
Yeah, you might be a little bit past it for Matilda. But,
yeah, that's right. A bit tall.
The hair could probably pull off Miss Honey.
Oh, the hair's fine. Mm.
Yeah. All right. So it's not a little secret insight that we might there might be a special guest in the Australia tour.
Not that I know of. I might even be getting a bit old for Miss Trunchbull. Mostly over 50s pull a hammy when they have to jump that. They have to jump a hobby horse or whatever you call them, and then do a somersault onto a mat. And every time we cast anyone about at my age or older, they ping something.
God. So a few years later, you probably have one of the more difficult moments in your career, and I want to talk about that a little bit. But I also want to get back to that piece around running again, and see if we see this kind of continued theme as you go through. So, do you just want to explain a little bit about what was happening with Larrikins and what your kind of running life looked like around that?
Yeah, well, the trouble with Larrikins, so I after Matilda, I realized that I sort of got a huge affirmation that my ability to tell story in song was not the most common thing in the world. And so I did a deal with DreamWorks, a development deal with DreamWorks Animation. And for a couple of years, they were looking for a project for me. And eventually I met Harry Cripps, an Australian who had written a show called Larrikins. And I was like, oh no, this is going to be like an Aussie, like everything I hate. I'm not hate, but I'm not the person for parochial Aussie stuff. That's not what I'm selling. I've never been a comedian or an act that is quintessentially Australian. I don't think, except my instinct for being an iconoclast, I suppose. But anyway, I read the script and it was absolutely gorgeous, and we started working on it. And then I wrote a bunch of songs, and eventually, through that development period, the director that was attached to it, the producer that was attached to it, started saying, "You should direct this. You should." And I was like, "Ha ha ha ha." And she's like, "No, you should direct it." And slowly that thought wheedled itself into my needy brain. And I thought, yeah, I could direct a $100 million animated film. And so in the end, once I realized they were serious and that I would have a co-director with animation experience, I said to Sarah,
actually knew what they were doing.
Yeah, that's right. A minder, a collaborator.
A minder.
Sarah, I think that in hindsight, that was a bit what it was. But I said, Sarah, like, we don't want to ever leave London. We love it here, but we don't want to stay here forever. We don't want to be expats forever. We want our kids to grow up near their cousins and all that. Maybe this job is the thing that will tear the Band-Aid off, and we'll just go to LA for 3 years, do this project, and then we'll be out. We'll be moving west, and we'll keep going from there. So that was what it was about. It was an opportunity. It was something different. There was a little bit. I was getting quite well known in England, and I thought that's maybe not the best thing for my kids. The other route was like, get your own late night show, tour more. I'd hit these huge, these huge venues.
Tim Minchin late night show would be great.
Well, we workshopped various ones. I was in a couple of sitcom pilots. I had a couple of scripts written for me, but somewhere in my head I thought, it's having a famous dad's not the best thing for kids. And I thought, I'm a composer lyricist, I'm a storyteller. I don't need to be in front of the camera all the time. So I made this decision, and Sarah and I made this decision. So we moved to LA and anyway, the short thing is we spent 3.5 years and 50-something million bucks on developing this amazing film. And then the studio got bought, and they just didn't have an appetite for something that was as different and risky as a rock and roll boys' own adventure Aussie outback musical with singing animals, and they shut it down and just wrote it off as a tax write-off. And quite suddenly, actually, there's a lot of other detail in that story. I did tour a bit while I was in America. I played Friar Tuck in a massive Robin Hood film that also flopped, but that wasn't so heartbreaking because it wasn't my creative. I was just an actor in that. And during that time, I also wrote Groundhog Day, which won Best Musical Olivier in London and transferred to Broadway and got a whole lot of success, but then also closed down and lost a bunch of money. Which is just, this is the rough and tumble of the industry in US. I mean, you're in a big ocean swimming with big sharks, and you don't get to win everything. So, but it was a tough time. My running was difficult because we lived in the Hollywood Hills, and I'm trail running up Griffith Park around the observatory. A lot of your listeners will know that area. And I was getting a bit injured because of the angles, and I found it hard. But and because I was in LA, it's like get a personal trainer to your house. But I ran a bit. I did a lot of trail running, and I was quite strong and got quite fit. But when things went bad, really, we moved to Australia quite soon after that. And there's no doubt I used running to try and still my mind. I was pretty pissed off for a quite long time. I got like cynical, which is not that's not ever been a part of my personality. And I have rebooted, and I am back to living optimistically because I think it's the only way to live. But I was like pretty chippy for a little while there, especially because of how I felt we were treated on Broadway. It's just it's ruthless, man. The US is ruthless, and some people love that blood sport version of whatever industry, but art and blood sport to me that's not how I want to go about it.
Yeah. So you come back to Australia, pretty shit time. What was kind of the plan for you then?
We moved to Sydney because my sisters were both living here. I wanted to live in Australia, but didn't think we could go back to Perth because that's a bit too small for. I mean, Australia is not the best place for me to be career-wise. So that was a big thing, actually, making the decision to not be the place where my career could get as big as it was possible. But that's all right. That felt right. We wanted to live near the beach. And I don't know, but by the time we moved back, I was already working on the development of Upright. So I did have a couple of projects that I was like, when I go back, there's something already bubbling. But not knowing where my next project is and where my next income is going to come from is a feature of a life like mine, and has been since the day I decided, to have my year off. I mean, you just trust. Well, in my situation, my cultural capital is such that now and even then when we moved to Australia, it's about there's much more work than I can say yes to. So, which is incredible. I wouldn't have ever thought that's where I was going to get. But I had said yes to developing Upright with a small production company, but it was a great idea, and a bunch of my friends were going to write it, had been hired as writers on it. And so by the time I got to Australia, despite the fact I was feeling a bit chippy, I threw myself very, very hard into Upright, and it remains one of the things I'm most proud of in my career. So in hindsight, that kind of tough time at the end of America, all those feelings and all that need to make something that doesn't get shut down, and my slightly unpacking how you get through those periods of your life, it's all in Upright. If you watch it, you can see me sticking the themes of overcoming hurdles and feeling a bit grim, and it's all in there. It's an amazing privilege of being an artist, is you get to put your feelings into your work, which is not always appropriate when you're a CEO of a petrochemical company.
Sir Jim Ratcliffe gets a mention on the podcast. That was unexpected. Are
you a runner?
I don't know. Maybe I need to reach out. Yeah, he's more likely a cyclist, right?
Yeah, definitely.
One of those.
What's lycra's made of fossil fuels.
Petrochemicals. Yeah. All right. So you moved to Australia. Moved back to Australia. Moved to Sydney. It's a pretty epic place to go running.
Yeah.
And in the eastern suburbs where you are, it's a pretty epic place to go running.
Yeah. Beautiful and annoying.
Yeah. Well, if you don't like hills, it's not the greatest place to find yourself. Did it become a bit more of part of your life again now that you're in Sydney?
Yeah. again, I ebbed and flowed a bit, and a lot of it is about managing my body. Got a bit of SIJ stuff and tightness, and I think that was probably because of hills and stuff. Again, maybe old hockey pain. But those runs where I live in near Gordons Bay, and so I've got my my quick 5K down to the top of the South Coogee Steps and back. I've got my 10K to Maroubra and back. I've got my 6K to Bronte and back, my 8K to the other side of Tammy and back, and my 11 if I want to go to the other end of Bondi. And you just know your routes, and they're so beautiful. And as I wrote on my family fitness app, we have my family and I have a thing where we post our runs, because when my mum died, we thought we'd get my dad moving, and so it's really cool. But I wrote to my folks after a particularly hard run north and back. Unfortunately, the novelty of the beauty runs out before the pain does. So because you're always like, oh, this is fantastic, and then you turn around at Bronte and have to come back up that hill, and you think, ugh, yeah, I don't care how pretty the cemetery is. This sucks. I'm going to Senny Park next door.
Wow, like there is really no other place to run other than Centennial Park, is there? That is just
well, it is now. I just hop in the car, and now I'm sort of trying to train a bit. There's just no point doing stairs and hills when you're just trying to do the opposite of that. I'm trying to get relaxed and not injure myself and get into a rhythm and run consistent times and all that. So yeah, San Antonio, I've just discovered Iron Cove. Sorry, this is very Sydney centric for your non-Sydney listeners, but that's a fantastic 7K circuit. Brilliant.
It is very, very popular spot as well.
Yeah.
All right, let's fast forward, get slightly closer to present day.
To the thing that changed my life, meeting Jason Hunt.
Yeah. So I hope it was. I hope it was a seminal experience.
If I die in the next 2 weeks, we will look back and say it was a seminal experience.
It may be my fault, but
yeah, totally. I mean, that's seminal. Cause of death is seminal.
So you run City to Surf, and you run a pretty good time. You just over.
Well, we're talking. It's all relative, but yes, I thought I'll try and run under 70, and I ran close to 60.
Yeah, which I
was surprised by, because it's pretty hilly, and I'm just a sort of stocky 50-year-old hobby runner.
Yeah, and so in the first episode that we recorded, and maybe if the
goes to the trash, yeah.
Well, I was going to say, if listeners like this one, there might be like a special release
outtakes
of the original one that comes out.
Yeah.
But we were discussing your running a little bit, and what I want to get into here before we get into the ultimate piece is whatever is going on in your head where you're like, nah, I'm never going to run a marathon, to literally in a few days in a conversation later, oh, maybe I'll run a marathon.
Yeah, that's right. I have maintained that. So right back to the beginning of this conversation and talking about the possible toxicity of not knowing how to give yourself a break, and the negatives of a personality trait that doesn't feel good about oneself unless one is achieving something. It's an unpeaceful way to be, and I'm aware of that, and I've always been aware of that. Since I was quite young, I noticed that I wasn't happy when people weren't clapping me, and I thought, that's no good. I need to be conscious of that, and I have been. As we've talked about, there have been times where I've pulled back from a potential fame and stuff because I've always been conscious that not everything you feel is valid. And so when it comes to running, when I ran that half, I loved it so much, but I was sore for a month, and well, maybe not, but it just felt my hips, and I thought my body didn't want to do that. Like my brain did, and I loved it. But the next day I thought, that's not what my body needs. And so I thought, well, people, when they get older, people like me, they all run marathons. And I'm going to prove to myself that I don't constantly need to prove myself to myself. And I'm going to prove that by never doing a marathon. I'm going to show myself that I don't need to always be trying to kick the next challenge in the dick. I'm going to show myself that I don't need to do a marathon like some midlife crisis saddo. And I failed. Well, at least we'll see. But I've failed. Yeah, I think I want to do a marathon.
Yeah, I was going to say, how's that going for you? And
It's
not
going
that well.
shit. And I'm feeling pretty sore now because I ran 32 Ks on Monday, and I really enjoyed it. But I still don't know if it's what my body needs, but it is what my heart desires.
Yeah, so we've been trying to figure out how to turn you into a professional marathon runner in 6 weeks.
Yeah. Well, that was the trouble. I decided with 7 weeks to go. I went after the City to Surf. I went, well, maybe I will do a marathon. I looked up Sydney, and it was the following week. I thought, probably not. But Melbourne was 7 weeks off, and it's the week of my 50th birthday. So I thought, well, God, fate wants me to run a marathon.
It feels meant
Fate
to
and
be,
Jason.
Right? Yeah. Sorry about that.
Yeah, and I am moving well, and I wasn't just City to Surf. The reason I ran a good City to Surf is I just did this huge UK tour, like 36 shows over 7 weeks in big venues, and it's the sort of thing that used to just trash me. I would get to the end of those tours like inevitably having got a flu and had to claw my way through the back end of the tour, and I'd drink too much, and I'd be hanging on by the fingernails, and I'd just get across the line, And this tour, I just was well, and I looked after myself. I had a few band members who were like a couple of girls from LA joined my band, and they're both vegans and didn't really drink. And everything was more settled. And I just went, I'm going to get my running chops back. So even though I wasn't training for a marathon, I've been interested to note that my body at 49.9 is performing in a way that is better than it was 10 years ago. Maybe because I got a bit less weight, but I don't know. I'm just like, I'm running okay. So here we are.
And to turn this into a little bit of a coaching conversation as we carry on.
Hit me.
So over the past, it must be like 4 weeks now, right? 3 weeks. We've still been pretty up and down, haven't we, in terms of, feeling good. That niggle was maybe more than a niggle.
I've
not sure where I'm at.
My right leg seems to be passing around pain. There was a left anterior tendonitis, something, and then the right hamstring, and then a lower back spasm, and now my hips. But I look, and I meant to say this to you when we were texting earlier. I mean, I think basically after the long run I just did, I think I'm probably with the adrenaline of the race and proper fueling, I'll be able to run 42 5-minute Ks. That's my goal. And I think I'd probably do it without much more training. And I think what I should spend the next 2 weeks doing is a bit of bike, maybe 3, 4, 10K runs. Maybe I should do a 15 or something, but I think basically I should just rest my legs for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
What do you reckon?
Coach approves. We're into the taper now anyway. So
exactly.
Yeah, given your body's a bit temperamental at times, doing less now is, we're not going to get you fitter. So we'll
probably not. I really love, but before we started training, I had my 10K down to closer to 42 minutes or whatever, and I was like really enjoying that pace. I love sitting around there. But that's not what I need now.
No. What do you, and this is probably a good thing for listeners in terms of like some people who may be thinking and looking at their first marathon, and we've discussed the fact that you have a 30-year plus running history, right? You've been somewhat consistent, so that is a massive piece.
I've run a lot of kilometers in my life,
for sure. And I think when we started, that gave me a lot of confidence to go like, I'm pretty sure you're going to be able to do this fine.
To get around the course,
Yeah. What are you what are you apprehensive of as you look to tackling this 42 Ks?
I guess there's a layer that not everyone has in that I got a late entry into Melbourne by signing up with Beyond Blue, which I'm really proud and stoked that I get to do because I think they're great. And I just paid the money that you need to so-called raise. I just paid it. But I do want to make sure I do my job for Beyond Blue. And when you're in my position, that means, of course, I could do a lot, so on Monday, I put it off as long as I could because I didn't want to get injured. The layer that not everyone has is I look like more of a dick if I say I'm going to do a marathon and fail. Not that I mind looking like a dick at all. In fact, performing vulnerability is very much a part of one's job, I think, as a chap in this era. I'm perfectly happy to break down and say I broke down, I tried, but I just didn't want to make a big fuss of the fundraising and then not make it to the start line.
Yeah.
So I put it off. So on Monday, I'm posting my page, and I think you might put this podcast out on Sunday. So
Correct.
I've been really careful not to go, I'm doing a marathon. I've just been working with you to see if I can get there. On Monday, I'm putting my page up, and I've told all my fans that I'll go dollar for dollar with them until we hit 20 grand. I'm happy to donate as well. So it's potentially a big project, and Beyond Blue will want to get me on tape, and now they want me to be an ambassador, all that stuff. So it comes with a bunch of other shit. So I've been cautious. But the run itself, I feel very, very lucky that I can still run at this age. It doesn't work for everyone. I think the consistency has been key. You can tell me, but my, layman's hypothesis is just that you accumulate the bone density and tendon sort of capacity or whatever, and so nothing's too much of a shock. I mean, I've never run more than 10Ks with any consistency at all. I mean, 8 to 10Ks has always been my distance, but still, I've put miles under my legs. And then since I met you, I've done whatever it is, 3 halves and a 30 and a 32. And I really enjoyed them, and I've found it very happy. My cardio is great. I would say to anyone thinking about it, you don't necessarily want to carry heaps of weight, I don't imagine. That's been something I've tried to do, just like get rid of a little bit of excess weight. And but it's just luck, man. Like I could have gone to run that 30 and just gone, oh, fucking no way. As it happens, I got to 32 Ks the other day. It was around the capital city trail in Melbourne, some nasty hills around Studley Park and stuff, bit of wind, bit of rain. I got to the end having not fueled properly because I'm crap at it and having not drunk enough water. And I felt if I had to run another 10 Ks that morning, it would have really sucked, but I probably would have done it fine. And if you add to that the adrenaline of the race and proper fueling and water stops everywhere you need them, and I think I'll be fine. But what do you reckon?
I'm pretty confident you'll smash it.
I just don't want to I am very undisciplined. If I feel like running fast, I just run fast, and I mustn't bank time, as my dentist the other day said, don't get tempted into banking time. But I'm like, So I think I would rather just run completely even split. Like I like settling into a pace and staying there. So I'm basically going to run 5:10s, and then if I've got some legs left, I don't know what I'm going to do. Who knows?
That's my job to figure it out, and you just have to be a good coachee and listen, right?
I'm so good at listening to other people, Jason. Good. My entire career has been based on listening to what other people say and doing exactly the fucking opposite.
Well, I've got a few strategies in mind, so I'm sure we'll make that happen.
Some punishment and some carrot and stick.
Pretty much. Well, it'll be a nice little thing for listeners to see what does happen there. It'll be like 2 weeks when this comes out over the weekend. So,
and maybe if I'm going to do it, and I am going to do it with a bit of a public profile, why don't your listeners help me and smash the fuck out of the fundraising? That would be really cool, I think, especially given the stuff you talk about on this pod and the times we live in. And I think Beyond Blue is a pretty amazing charity to be contributing a bit to.
Yeah, for sure. If they don't want Beyond Blue, they can jump to Movember as well.
They can jump to Movember, of course. Yeah, no, I'm stealing charity dollars off you, Jazz.
You are. No, that's fine. I'll just make sure you make a good donation to Movember as well.
There you go. Yeah, quid pro quo.
Awesome. Well, as we wrap this up, I'm going to go to the regular questions that I ask everybody. One of them we've not really touched on about you at all, but there's certainly some aspects, and I'll maybe paint a bit of picture in there. But I get some advice. We get our top piece of advice on life, leadership, and running. Maybe before I do that, the piece around leadership, and I have to do this to make sure I figure out how you're related to Execs Who Run, right? Otherwise, I'm just cramming you in because you're an interesting person to
I
talk
think you
to.
can just cram people in once
I
you've got a
think I probably-
podcast.
I think
As long
you
as
can,
your
right?
listeners aren't, I doubt your listeners are like, I listen to Jason because I'm just wait for the bit where the person gives advice and I write it down. I think probably they just know that you have interesting conversation.
Hopefully. But like leadership is a big part of
Yes, of
what
course.
you've done throughout your life, whether it be, directing a show that doesn't end up happening, or, dealing with a million piece orchestra when you're touring, or whatever it is. There's always aspects of you as a leader of people, but also as a leader of ideas, or just the influence that you then have as a public figure, right? That is a leadership position that has to be
Yeah, increasingly,
through
I am asked to speak to various topics in front of various people, including corporate leaders. And yesterday I was at the Opera House doing a speech in front of a lot of politicians and policymakers and arts leaders. And yeah, it is increasingly a part of my job, and increasingly something I have a rhetorical skill set that I'm hoping as I get older I can apply for good purpose. Yeah.
Or maybe we start with the leadership one there. Like what would be your piece of advice from your perspective? And it's a different view than maybe other listeners I have or other guests I've had, but what would yours be?
Well, I won't try and pretend I have clear advice. I mean, there's no doubt the leadership I need to show is a very different sort of thing. I mean, on the one hand, something I'm very, very sure of is that modeling behavior as a parent, as a singer, and a lead in a play, or a director on a movie, or the act when you're touring with 50 orchestra players. You give people below you, in inverted commas, the cues to what sort of culture you want. And I know there's data that shows that you can have a successful company by being with fear as your main tool, and you can have a successful company that's really horizontally integrated, and there's no sense that anyone's scared of anyone. I don't know how that all falls out, but for me, watching how artists respond and people, it will trickle down. If the people at the top are having tantrums and being selfish and losing their minds and not treating people with respect, then it gives the next layer permission, more than permission. They feel obliged to act like that, and it just goes down and down and down until the very bottom of fighting. So I think, especially in my industry, artists are expected to have poor self-regulation, and I reject that entirely. It's absolute bollocks. You don't need to have bad self-regulation to be a good artist. So treating everyone with respect, and especially people with the lowest amount of power in any hierarchy. I think the best way to model a culture that you can be proud of is to make sure you never treat the least powerful person poorly. I'm much more likely to have a stand-up argument with the head of a studio. And then the other things I kind of know a little bit about, or at least I grapple with, is the balance between making sure, giving other people permission to shine, making sure other people feel like there's space to have ideas and creative input, balanced against knowing when the reason you're the guy who is getting paid the big bucks, or the reason you're the leader in that room is because you have accumulated skills that not everyone has, and you need to pull rank, or at least say have confidence. So that's a really big thing for me that I imagine a lot of your listeners might have versions of. Like certainly my brother, who's a CEO, he and I talk a lot about that balance. Like, how do you make sure everyone has a voice, but without spending hours listening to ideas that you know damn well are not as good as yours, and you just need to go, no, it's this, crack on. So that's not so much advice as something I acknowledge as a challenge. And I'm not sure how good I am at it because I get very excited. I'm like, oh, it's this, and I'm like, oh, I probably haven't left a lot of room there, but I'm definitely right. So let's follow my instinct, you know.
Yeah.
And you must, as an artist, or probably as a founder or a CEO of any company that's trying to innovate, you must trust yourself. You know, like you got to back your ideas, but you don't want to shut down the others. So
totally, and to be a role model, you still have to be you, right?
Yes,
so
that's
that
right.
piece and you doing those things is fine because it's still just being you, and hopefully you're a somewhat decent person, and that makes sense, right?
Yes, that's right. I don't think I'm bullying anyone, but you could get steamrolled by my enthusiasm without a doubt. And something I think I've got wrong. It is perhaps a valid criticism that I can accidentally be a big force in a room, and I also, because I can articulate ideas quite clearly, I can kind of sell ice to Eskimos a bit. So I can baffle with words and terminology and a well-constructed argument that can make people feel like they're not being heard because they don't have the verbal capacity or acuity, and therefore they don't know how to respond. But they, you know, so that's something I've had to work on. To my credit, I also am very good at, I do not care where the best idea comes from. And I found America hard because it's very hierarchical. If I would speak and everyone go, okay. And I'm like, hold on, you're all animators who have trained. Like, can someone tell me why I'm wrong?
Yeah.
Like, I would literally demand, like, the meeting's not over until someone's had one better idea than the ones I've had. Come on. Like, and if that idea came from a junior storyboard artist or whatever, then I have absolutely no problem going, that one, you know, which you'd be a fool to have a problem with that, wouldn't you? I mean,
totally. Like some of the most successful businesses on the planet, that's their default.
Best idea wins. Right? Best idea wins. Yeah.
Okay. What about broad life advice?
Well, maybe it's the same. Maybe, you know, be the change you want to see in the world, like model the type of person. I mean, I think my life advice, the contemporary life advice, is to note that technology has stolen from us our agency vis-a-vis information input. We used to go, I'm going to pick up the paper and smoke my pipe and read the paper for 20 minutes and then, or whatever. Well, I'm going to sit down and watch the news at 6. And that would be the world news or whatever. I'm going to read a book. Now we don't have autonomy. We have been addicted without even knowing we were taking a drug to information. And now look, many of your listeners are smarter than me, so they won't have ever got on social media. But for those of us on social media or who have news apps that send us alerts, or just pick up our phone and look at, you know, whatever, we are not really choosing when we get a glimpse at some horror overseas or some, you know, that loss of agency over when we take on information is causing great harm politically and emotionally across society. So a big thing that I've done in the last couple of years is wrestle back my agency. I now read the news a little bit when I'm ready, and I'm not caught in this trap of information that's basically being fed to me because an advertiser wants me to be on their site, you know.
Yeah.
I know that seems really discreet, a small thing, but I think it's huge. It affects how good a boss you can be, how good a dad you can be, how good a partner you can be, or how good a mum you can be. It's really a scourge, I think.
I think it makes sense. I can certainly see that in my life as well. But so having that control over the information that's coming in. It's not saying don't get the information, because to be better and to change things and whatnot, you need the information, but you can be
Yes.
controlled about the consumption.
Well, and
of it.
why are we victims of what the algorithms that you're getting fed information that will make you upset? That's why you're being fed it. The whole of media and social media is just rage bait, and so we all get told what to focus on. We're not choosing what to focus on, and it's really up to us to take that power back, because until we just refuse to go on advertising algorithm run sites, it'll just get worse and worse, and we'll get more and more angry and divided, blah, blah, blah. That's my pet subject.
I asked Tim before we started.
What's the thing you can go on about?
And that was that. So stay tuned for
I did quite well at keeping it short.
You did. I was like, stay tuned for a 2-hour feature on Tim's view on the world. Yeah.
Yeah. Wait till they go into AI, man. We'll be lucky if we're all still here in 2 years.
Final piece. Running. What's your running advice?
I mean, it's like my advice for jobs and music is love it. You know, you just remember you're here to love it. I mean, yeah, I don't know whether that's advice. It strikes me. Well, here's another way of putting it. Like, count your blessings is a better way of putting it. I mean, it's very easy in life to notice what you don't have, especially in the way we consume media and stuff. And it's, for me, with running, I've got better as I've got older at really trying not to catastrophize when I have an injury or whatever. That's part of running, is sometimes you can't. I used to go, oh no, if I don't, I'm going to be miserable. Now I just go, okay, well, I'm going to have to go on the bike or get in the water or whatever. And the flip side of that is to, when I'm moving well and I'm enjoying my running, just being really present to how lucky one is to have a body that moves. Because I mean, I'm working on a thing now with disability advocates. I mean, nothing, we take for granted so much. And so I try to be really present to what an absolute blessing it is to have a body that will do this, and hopefully do it for a few years yet.
Sure. We'll get you for a few years, as long as we get you through the next couple of weeks.
Through Sunday the 12th.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much for coming on again. It's been
pleasure.
Great to have another chat.
Yeah.
This isn't a pluggy podcast, but we won't call it a plug. We'll call it a public service announcement. What have you got coming up? What can people...
I mean, I'm touring my big 20-year anniversary show called Songs the World Will Never Hear. And it's the show I toured around the UK, and I'm doing 3 palets from October 31st, and I think Sydney 29th of November at the ICC, and all around Australia. It's a big, fun show encompassing material from quite a few from early comedy and stuff I haven't played for years, and then stuff from my recent album. I just put an album out called Time Machine as well, so have a listen to that. I mean, there's not many tickets left, and I don't really need you to listen to my record, but I love it. You know, I love when people come to my shows. So,
why only one show in Sydney? Surely.
Well, I'm playing the ICC, which
Big
is
enough.
even though I did get to arenas and stuff, that was never my goal, and I pulled right back and started doing smaller venues. But this concert, it's a bit of a I don't know, flex. So ICC is almost 8,000 seats. So I mean, I'd love to be someone who can sell 2 ICCs, but I'm also a bit saturated in this market. I did a solo tour last year and a book tour as well. So
it's doing too much.
I think I'm doing all right. Yeah.
So what you're saying is no one's going to listen to this podcast because they're all sick of hearing the sound of your voice? Or?
Yeah, totally. I mean, no one is as sick of my voice as I am, but I don't know. Some people find me interesting. Some people find me unbearable. It's just something you have to get used to.
That's the world, isn't it?
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, obviously we will chat over the next little while. Looking forward to seeing how it goes.
See you on the app. I'm not doing anything today, Jason. Is that right? I mean, I should get on a bike, but I think I've run out of time.
No, I think I'll give you a pass today. Yeah.
Thanks, man.
Amazing. Right. Cheers.
Cheers, Jason.